Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be doing an exciting book review. I'm really excited because if you've seen previous book reviews, I haven't had a lot of good luck with books recently, but I feel like that luck is changing because I've just read two books I really liked in a row. One I'm not really going to do a review on because I don't have that much to talk about, so I'm just going to talk about it in my wrap up. And this review, as you've seen, is for the book that I just finished, and it is The Book Eaters by Sunyi Dean. I'm not sure how to say her name, but that is her name. Also, this is the Illumicrate edition. I'm sorry if you haven't seen it yet. I apologize, this is my only edition, so this is one I gotta hold up. If you want to see what it looks like, continue watching because I'll show you a little. Okay, so this is the cover. It's got black sprayed edges, but it's got like the manor house that they live in. And then this is the back. Go ahead and read that. And then there's exclusive end pages and this gorgeous interior cover. Honestly, I don't know which one I like better. Love that and that. So I really like this edition of the book, and it kind of pushed me to read it. I wanted something different, and this came like last week, and I was like, let's just read this. Let's just read this because this sounds pretty good. It's October. This seems like a horror book and it seems unique. So if you don't know, this book follows our main character, Devin, who is something called a book eater. So in this world, there are like 6 great families who are long lines of things called book eaters. Instead of eating human food, they eat books. That's how they intake like knowledge. They can read, but they choose not to. It's kind of taboo in their society, but they eat books, and it's wild. It's wild. They're very unlike humans. They have like superior strength. They can see in the dark. They don't feel like cold or hot really, and they have fertility issues runs in their families. Because there's such small like amounts of families, there is probably some issues with like inbreeding, and it's just they have issues having children, especially girls. So they are slowly dying out, and they're currently researching into like human IVF and stuff like that. That's not like a big part of the book. It's just something that's like in the background that's there, and that's why a lot of the choices that the men make in this society are made, and why the women are so oppressed and kind of treated like livestock. So our main character, Devin, she lives in the society, and she's what they call a princess because she is a female born into one of these families, and they, like I said, are treated like livestock. So she is contracted at birth. Basically, she's going to have 2 children, and I think they weren't like 100% explicit, I don't think, but they can only have 2 children is what it seems like. So they are married to someone in another family for a price that goes to that family, and she's basically shipped off, lives at the family until she's pregnant, and then she's allowed to stay like 3 years to nurse the kid, and then she's shipped back home for the second marriage. She doesn't get to see the kids. She doesn't do anything like that. The kids are separated from the moms because the moms, their whole point is to have the children. So it's tough. Like it's really tough to read. And the reason that this story exists is Devin, our main character, cannot stand the idea of being separated from her children. So things happen. The story is told in 2 timelines. One from when basically Devin's childhood to current, like it meets at current at the end, and then current day. And current day is her and her one of her children. You don't know, it's second, first, whatever. It's one of her children, and it turns out that her child is what they call a mind eater. So there is a branch off of the book eaters called mind eaters, and mind eaters, as it says, do not sustain themselves off of books. They sustain themselves off of human or any type of brains. And one of the big families, the Ravenscars, came up with a way, it's kind of like True Blood, synthetic blood. This is synthetic like brain. They're able to curb the hunger by giving them this drug called redemption. But the whole reason the story is taking place is because that house has fallen apart and gone into secrecy, so redemption doesn't exist anymore, and Devin is desperately trying to find a way to get that drug for her child. So this whole book basically revolves around Devin's past, and you learning all about the book eaters through Devin's past and what she had to go through and the trauma that she had to go through, and her currently trying to do everything within her means to protect her child. It is a brutal book. It is a brutal, traumatizing book, and I actually don't think it's horror, which is, this is gonna be like, depending on who reads it, if you're gonna think this is horror or not. I don't think this is horror. I think it has horrific things that happen in it. There are some awful, horrific things that happen, but I don't think it's a horror. I think this is a fiction literature book that focuses heavily on trauma and this Handmaid's-esque world that our main character has to live in. And it's just, oh, it is so difficult. So I did give this 4 stars. I really, really like this book. I did struggle with some stuff in this book, but overall, I really, really liked it. I actually thought it was gonna be a 5-star, but there are a few things that kind of took away from the 5 stars. So it ended up getting a 4, but I really, really enjoyed this book. It is so unique. It is so different. It's so different than anything like I've read, I was gonna say recently, but probably in the past few years. This is so different. Very unique idea. Obviously, like, the undercurrent, she's running away, trying to protect her child, that's all similar, but the book eater stuff is so cool. Like, this magical, not magical, but this, like, side secret society-esque kind of secret world separated from the humans is so fascinating and so cool and so different that I loved reading about it. But before I get into things that I like and dislike, I am going to talk about trigger warnings because there's a lot in here. This book was not made for everyone to read it at all. This needs to come with a big sticker warning on the front, like, hey, there are some incredibly difficult things in here. First off, violence against women. There's no sexually explicit things on the page, like, think Handmaid's Tale. The women are basically treated like cattle, just for birthing, etc. They're not treated well. But if you know how graphic Handmaid's Tale is, it's not graphic. It's just hinted at, but it is still there. And especially, like, just general violence and distaste for women is in this book. If you have an issue, if you are a new mom or you have an issue with anything about children and violence against children and mothers being separated from children and anything where you just don't like reading about children, do not read this. Do not read this because it is a huge portion of this book. Moms being separated from kids, a kid kind of being morally gray, doing whatever it takes to survive. There is a scene in here. I am not a mom. I don't necessarily feel that traumatic when I read about, like, children things. However, there is a scene in this book that has to do with a baby, and it was the most traumatic scene I've read in a book in a while. It's not even, like, that bad, but it was, that was rough. That was rough. I don't even know if she should have included in this. I feel like it was something at the end that I feel like just didn't need to be described because it was brought up twice, and the second time it was described instead of just glossing over it. I don't know if she needed to do that, and it's one of the reasons I actually gave it lower than a 5 because it was honestly traumatizing, and I'm not gonna forget about it. So I'm just kind of like, ooh, that scene was really, really rough. At the very end of this review, if you want to know more about that, I'm going to talk a little bit in spoilers. I'm not going to do a ton of spoilers, but I will talk about it a little bit because there's so many triggers that I want people to be, like, aware of what's going on in this book. So those are definitely, like, the major triggers. And if you don't like death, there's a lot of death in this. And if you don't like morally gray characters, the whole book is full of morally gray characters. Honestly, it's almost a book that is revolving around levels of how evil people are. Like, I can't even say really that our characters are morally gray. I don't know. Honestly, this is what I've been struggling with. I was thinking, like, how do I describe these characters? Are they morally gray, or are they just villains in their own way? Like, they're heroes in their stories, but they're villains in everyone else's story. I mean, it's so difficult because of the circumstances going on in this book, whether they're morally gray or actually just bad people. I don't know. But it's like, no one is good in this. No one is through and through good in this book. So if you don't like that, you are not gonna like this book whatsoever. All right, we're gonna talk about the things that I liked. There's a lot of stuff that I liked. Like I've said before, I loved the world building. It was so good. I felt like I knew everything that was going on. I feel like I was in a separate world. I feel like it could fit in our world, which is really, really impressive. Her writing was so good that it felt like it could be real, and this stuff is going on, like, and we don't even notice. So good, love that. Oh, so good. The commentary on women. This book is obviously very much Handmaid's Tale-esque, where women aren't seen as important in society other than making babies, and that is their only point to being alive. And I feel like that is very relevant in today's time. So if you want to read something that is going to really pull your heartstrings about how women are treated, this is definitely a good book for that. And it has really good commentary on people's worth, and just, oh, it was so good. It was so good, but it definitely was hard to read at times, though. It was definitely hard to read at times, some of the stuff going on in here. I love the characters. The characters were so vibrant. Even the villains, the straight up villains, because there are a couple just straight up villains. The villains were so vibrant. Our main character and her son were so vibrant, and the people that they meet along the way. Everyone, the second they were on the page, had such personality, so unique to each individual character. Like, I didn't feel like there was overlap with any characters. Like, I couldn't get two people mixed up even if I tried. Everyone was so different, and I could picture them so well, and I love that. I love when I can really feel what a character is feeling and looks like. It's like I know them. The plot. I mean, the plot was great. It had great motivations. It had good, it was very well rounded and paced very well. I thought it paced very well. There's a couple, I'll talk about what I didn't like. There was like a part at the end that I felt was unnecessary, and it kind of like jerked you out of the pacing, out of the story a little bit. But again, we'll get to that in dislikes. But overall, the pacing was really, really good. Plot was super fun. I don't know about fun, but it was entertaining to read, even though it was difficult at times. But it was a very interesting plot too. And I love the morally gray characters. Like, that was, I feel like I was so impressed with how she did the morally gray / villainous characters, because she leaned into it. She did not shy away. She didn't try and make like a arc at the end where they're like, oh, what I did was bad, I regret everything. No. Heck no. These characters leaned in to what they were, what their personalities, everything. They leaned into what they were 100%. And I appreciated that, because it didn't feel like I was reading a story where all of a sudden the character was like, oh, I didn't want to do that. And then you're like, who is this character? No. You knew who these characters were from the beginning. You knew the decisions they were going to make. Every decision they made 100% made sense. The Mind Eaters. The reason that this would be classified as horror is because of the Mind Eaters, because they are horrifying. They're horrifying, but again, I wasn't like scared of them. I more felt bad for them because of their circumstances, because they didn't pick what they are. They didn't pick this violent lifestyle that they're basically forced into. So I more felt bad for them, and that makes them horrifying characters, because they are villains, but not really, because they're forced into it. So it's just, their characters are so complicated, and I absolutely love them, even though they're definitely what made me the most uncomfortable throughout the book. Like, anytime I read about a Mind Eater, I was physically uncomfortable because I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what they were going to do. And you can't hate them, and it makes you even more uncomfortable because you can't hate them. Okay, there's plenty more stuff I probably liked about this book, but that's what I'm going to stick with. The things that I didn't like, so at the very, very end of the book, so like I said, it switches between present and past, and when it got really close to mixing the present and the past, like meeting, there were like 3 chapters in a row of the past. And honestly, the detail that she went, I didn't feel like it was 100% necessary. So the scene with the baby, I don't think it needed to be explored as much as she did. I think she did enough, like she can just say blah, 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 this happened with the baby. It did not need to go as full throttle as it did. At the same time, it's probably just because it made me uncomfortable. It probably was needed, but I was so uncomfortable in that scene, and it for me, it took away some of my love for the main character, but at the same time, I feel like that was the point, because she's supposed to be morally gray / pretty much a villain in everyone else's story except her own. So it's just, I don't know. I didn't like it. I still don't know if it was necessary or not. So I would love to hear what you guys think if that scene was necessary, because you're gonna know what scene I'm talking about. It's the baby at the very end. You're gonna know what I'm talking about if you've read it. And then there's a scene at the end. Her kid does something, and I didn't love the ramifications of it. I didn't love the ramifications because it was starting to feel hopeful at the end. And I feel like the book ended on kind of a sour note. And that's the other thing I didn't like. I don't think this is a standalone. I feel like this constantly is happening to me. This is not a standalone, in my opinion. This ended on kind of a cliffhanger. And I really, really hope, it's not a cliffhanger. Like, this definitely ended, but it left a lot unfinished. Like, it left a ton of stuff unfinished. So this just didn't feel like a standalone. So I really hope there's another book coming out for this, because I'll be really sad if they're not. And I would really like to like return to this world, even though I'll be highly uncomfortable, but I do want to return to it. So, okay, that's pretty much all I disliked. We're gonna talk about spoilers, but only briefly, because there's not like I said, this isn't like a mystery thriller kind of thing going on. It's pretty much laid out, like exactly you know what's going on, and you can guess like some of the twists and stuff. Twists, because they're very lightly twists. It's mostly just like kind of traumatic stuff that happened that I was surprised about, and we're going to talk about a little bit of that. So if you are nervous about reading, you can listen to these parts and see if you're okay with reading it. So pop up the little spoilers thing and let's get into the spoilers. I'm not going to talk about the baby first, just in case people get stuck on this video and then I don't want them to start hearing it and be like, oh god, turn it off. First spoiler I want to talk about is the ending. We'll talk about the ending. I don't think it's a standalone because of Salem. The fact that we didn't even see Salem on the page after she was taken away from her mom. So she had, her first child was a daughter, Salem, and after 3 years she was taken away. And the rest of the book, she's obsessed about Salem while she's taking care of her second child, Kai, who's the mind eater and who she's hiding from everybody and trying to find the drug for. The book ends basically saying, I'm gonna come back for Salem. We don't actually go get her. Like, this is not in this book, because I kept waiting for it. I got to like the last 10 pages and I'm like, how are we possibly gonna get Salem? Because that was a huge part of this book. So if there was no second book going to get Salem and dealing with the ramifications of what happened, because it's not over. Like, what happened in this book is not over. It did not wrap up neatly, nothing, which I kind of appreciated because it's so complicated. I didn't think it could wrap up in this short of a book. But we have to go get Salem. Like, I'm so curious what's gonna happen. And she's gotta go deal with Salem's dad, who's an absolute jerk. So I wanna see her tear down all the families and the men. I wanna see her dismantle the entire system and get to the point where they can have marriages with humans and stuff like that. That's what I want from a second book. And I really hope that happens, because I won't feel like this is a completed series without something where she is just destroying the men in these books who abused her. So, and then the other like ending spoiler is her son saves her by mind eating her brother, who is interesting. He's like the main villain. He's like legitimately a villain. And it left me feeling uncomfortable, like I said, because now her brother's brain is inside her son for forever. And that makes me so uncomfortable, and I don't like that happened on literally like the second to last page. There was a moment of hope though. I do like what they did with it, because they made it very clear that her son had a very strong willpower, and it seems like after he eats somebody, he's able to like go play his games and kind of almost reset his brain. Like, there's still something in there from the previous people, but it almost resets his brain and he can become himself again. So even though he's like quoting her brother, he starts humming the Mario Nintendo theme song. So in my head, I'm like, okay, so he'll be fine. He'll be just fine. But you're not left on that comforting note of like, oh, he will be fine. It's is he gonna be okay? Like, he's definitely humming it, but is he gonna be okay? So that left me highly uncomfortable. And it left, obviously, our main character very uncomfortable, which I didn't like either. That was probably my main issue with like the end of the book. I didn't like that he had to save her, but it made sense because there was a whole monologue about how he loved his mom. He loved Devin because she was also a monster and would do anything to protect him, and he would do anything to protect her. So 100%, like, you could see it coming. I knew it was coming. I just didn't want it to happen. And the last spoiler we're going to be talking about is the baby. So this is what I feel like would turn a ton of people away and maybe even turn people off from this book completely. Her son came to her rescue when he was a baby, not a baby, like 3, and mind ate his own dad. And as a 3-year-old eating a book eater's brain, his brain got overwhelmed and he started screaming in pain, and they needed to reset him. So they brought an infant. They brought a tiny little baby, and they like described the baby's appearance and how sweet the baby is. And then they fully described her son eating the baby's brain. And I did not like that. It was way too descriptive. They had already brought it up. They had already brought it up and said, this is how we saved him. I don't feel like it needed to be described in that much detail because that was a little traumatizing. That was legitimately traumatizing. But I think the purpose was to show, hey, Devin's gonna do anything it takes, even destroying other people's lives, other people's children, other people's families, to save her own child. So I don't know if it's necessary or not, because I feel like you're supposed to kind of hate her after that, but also understand what she's going through, and it's just so hard. I don't know. I don't know about that. It's just a difficult thing to talk about, and it's a difficult thing to read about. But that is all the spoilers I'm going to talk about, because again, there's not that many spoilers in here. And I think the spoilers that I didn't talk about, you can have a good time reading them, because again, they're not that like big spoilers. And that's all I've got about this book. I really, really enjoyed this book. Again, like I said, there were some moments that made me really uncomfortable, but overall, I really enjoyed this. It was a 4-star read. Very excited. Hopefully there's a second one, and I'm going to move on to my next choice of book, which is The Family Game, which hopefully is a more or less dense and involved book. Hopefully it's just a fun thriller. It seems like it's gonna be Ready or Not, that movie. So I hope you guys enjoyed this book. If you guys read this book, let me know what you guys thought about it. If you liked it, if you didn't like it. If you didn't like it, let me know why you didn't like it. I'm very curious. I have some suspicions why. If you didn't agree with anything that I said, let me know what you didn't agree with, what you did agree with. Make sure you like the video, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more reviews, and I will see you guys in the next video.